11.2 Classes, grouping data. Multiple variables are frequently closely related and should thus be treated as one variable with multiple parts. For example, two variables called hours and minutes might be grouped together in a single variable called time. The class keyword can be used to create a user-defined type of object containing groups of related variables and functions. So the format for that would be something like class name. So the name of your class you would insert there, and then a colon, and then you have various statements underneath it. A class defines a new type that can group data and functions to form an object. The object maintains a set of attributes that determine the data and behavior of the class. Usually we call attributes just the data, the variables that go into the class. But some people also say that the functions are also attributes as well. That gets a little confusing on the vocabulary. So be careful when you're talking to somebody. They may be thinking about it one way and you might be thinking about it a different way. Okay, the following code defines a new class containing two attributes, hours and minutes, whose values are initially 0. Okay, so we have class time, and we normally capitalize class names and then a colon, and it's traditional to put a multi-line comment marker with the 3 quotes. You can either use single quotes or double quotes. Now, you have to have a constructor, and you say it's actually a function, and so you use the def keyword, and then you need to use underscore underscore init underscore underscore, and that is 2 underscores before and after the init. And then you have parentheses, and you have self as the first parameter, and you'll always have self as the first parameter in the functions inside a class. You can have additional parameters if you want, but the self has to come first. And then you've got your parentheses closed and a colon, and then you need to have the names of your attributes, hours and minutes, and precede it with the word self and a dot. Okay, self dot hours equals 0, self dot minutes equals 0. When you create an object of type time, it will automatically have variables in it called hours and minutes, and those variables will be called attributes. Okay, there's some new terminology to use in classes. We call instantiation the operation that's performed by calling the class. We use parentheses like a function call, like my time equal time paren. That actually calls the init method, even though we don't say init paren. An instantiation operation creates an instance or an object, an individual object of that given class. Instantiation is just a fancy word for creation. Okay, so you're creating an object from the class. It's very similar to the class is like a blueprint for a house, and the object is like the house itself. And so you would say you instantiated a house from the capital house class. A method is a function defined in a class. So now we've got a fancier name for function. If a function is inside a class, it's known as a method. And I guarantee that will be on an exam. The init method with 2 underscores in front, end, and back is known as the constructor. It's responsible for setting up the object itself and creating its initial state. In this case, we had both of them, both of the attributes equal to 0. Okay, the init method has a single parameter self that automatically references the instance that's being created. So a programmer writes an expression such as self.hours equals 0 within the init method to create a new attribute hours. Okay, now here it shows how to actually use that class that we just created. So we've still got class time and the same constructor, and then to create an instance or an object of type time, we give it a variable name, such as my time, equal, and then give it the name of the class, and notice this is capitalized. It's capitalized by convention. Python doesn't really care. And then you have parentheses. Now notice you don't have self inside the parentheses or anything else. You always have one less argument in the calls to the functions or methods in a class than you do in the definitions of those methods And then you can change hours and minutes here by saying mytime.hours. Notice up here it said self.hour, but down here you say mytime.hour. Inside the class, it refers to the object always with the keyword self. Outside of the class, you refer to it with the name of the object and a dot. And then if you want to print something, you can say print and use mytime.hours. Again, I would use an F string here instead of using the format function. Okay, attributes can be accessed using what's known as the attribute reference operator, which is the period. It's also known as the member operator or dot notation. Just like you can have one blueprint for a house and you can build many houses based on that and actually have some variation among that, you can have many objects created from a single class. So you can make more than one time object. So we have our time class here, and then time1 will be our first object, and we call that, we're going to call time instead of calling init, and this calls the constructor. Again, you don't pass it anything, but it's actually internally passing the object itself into here. Then time1.hours is 7, time1.minutes is 30. Then we have a time2 equal time paren, and then we can set the hours and minutes here. We'll find an easier way to handle this in a few minutes. Okay, let's look at this challenge activity. 11.2.1, declaring a class. Declare a class named patient data that contains two attributes named height inches and weight pounds. Sample output for the given program with inputs of 63 and 115 would be patient data before 0 inches, 0 pounds, patient data after 63 inches, 115 pounds. So notice they're putting these numbers into the inches and pounds. We've got patient equal patient data, and they're printing the before and all that. So we've got to make the class. So remember, we have the class keyword, and then we need a name for it, and they called it patient data. Now there's no parens after the class name. Okay, you see it down here, but that's really it's really calling init. Okay, and then we need to say def underscore 12 init 12 paren self paren close colon, and then we need to have height inches and weight pounds. So instead of saying patient dot like it says there, we have to say self dot, and then height inches, and make sure you spell it the same way, and self dot weight pounds equal 0. And you can say return here if you want. You don't have to. That should do it. Let's try that. Yep. Okay, so when it calls, it creates a patient object, and then it prints patient data before, and then it prints the height, inches, weight, pounds, and those are 0 because they were initialized that way. And then they set height, inches, and weight, pounds, and they get the input from the user. And again, we should have a prompt there, but our omniscient user in the sky already knows what it is we're going to prompt for. And then when they enter two numbers, then it substitutes the first one into height and the second one into weight. And then when you print this again, you get the new height and weight. Challenge activity 11.2.2, access a class's attributes. Print the attributes of the inventory tag object red sweater. Then sample the output for the given program with inputs 314 and 500. They've given you the class and the constructor. They've given you the calls to create the object. All you need to do is print it. And they've changed the item ID and quantity remaining by asking the user for the information. So all you need to do down here is your print statement. And your print statement is going to have red sweater.item ID in it and red sweater.quantity remaining. Okay, I'll do the first one for you. That was ID, so you want to say print. I'm going to use the F string, quote, ID colon space, and then I'm going to use curly braces and say red sweater dot item ID curly brace closed. That's an integer, so I don't need to worry about putting if it was a floating point with 2 decimals, I'd put a colon 0.2 there and an F, but I don't need to do that since it's just a decimal. Since it's just an integer. And then closing quote, like that. I'm going to go ahead and run it. I didn't do the other one, I'll let you do that one. So it did print ID 314 like it was supposed to, and you can make it print the quantity.